victims of crime don't have their own lawyers,
Right.
right? It's the prosecutors represent this, the people of the state. Nobody has the back of the victim or the victim's family. And you learn very quickly as a young prosecutor that you kind of play that role. You're not technically their lawyer, but they don't have anyone but you fighting for them. My first assignment in hardcore was the Compton courthouse.
Yeah.
My first day there, they handed me 21 murder cases and said, kid, get up to speed. Your first trial's in like 2 weeks. And so all the hardcore deputies primarily did homicides, attempt murders where there was actually a hit. And I did that for about 6 years. The justice system has 3 parts. It has the neutral, unbiased referee, the judge. It has the defense lawyer, whose obligation is to the client and the client only. And then there's the representative of the people of the state. And their job is to do the right thing, whatever that may be. Whatever that may be. And if that is prosecute the individual charged as charged to the fullest extent of the law, that's what it is. If it's dismiss the case outright because it's the wrong person, or they didn't do what somebody said they did, or law enforcement violated their due process, so be it.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Truth Nation. My name's Bill Bodner. With me, the co-host of the show, the chief, Mark Garrett. Mark, we got a special guest today, Joseph Esposito. I think you and I probably refer to him as Joey Esposito, kind of a fixture in the LA County District Attorney's Office since, 1989? Someone who was a rock there, someone who kind of believed in a justice system that worked for all the people of the county. I think that's probably the most succinct description I can give of what he did there. Joey, thanks for coming on this morning, and thanks for speaking to the chief and I.
Oh, thanks for having me, Bill, and it's good to see the chief too.
It's good to see you, Joey. It's not so good to see Bill. I see him too
Right.
often, but it's
Right.
a special treat. So,
Joey, tell me, what was it about prosecuting crimes? What was it about the job of being a prosecutor that lured you to that occupation back in the day?
Yeah, it's a good question because, people ask you that all the time. Like, why did you end up doing what you were doing? I went to law school to be a sports agent, and it didn't take long for me to kind of fall in love with criminal law. And I think ultimately, in contrast to what I do now, I'm in private practice. And private practice is great, and it has its, definite, pros and its cons, like anything else does.
Mhm.
But one of the things I loved about being a deputy DA was that you do the job because you love it, right? If you work the extra hour, the extra 2, the extra 5, the extra 10, you don't get paid any more. You don't get paid any less. And victims of crime don't have their own lawyers, right? It's the prosecutors represent this, the people of the state. Nobody has the back of the victim or the victim's family. And you learn very quickly as a young prosecutor that you kind of play that role. You're not technically their lawyer, but they don't have anyone but you fighting for them. So you put all those things together, and it was a great job. I did it for 32 years. I started as a summer law clerk and finished as the chief deputy, the number 2 in the office, directly underneath the elected DA. And, I didn't want to leave when I left, but it was the right time to leave. And I would do it all over again. If I could start all over from day one, knowing exactly how it ends up, I would do it all over again.
Right. So what was your first assignment when you came on board there?
I was assigned as a trial deputy in East LA, basically a misdemeanor deputy. I did misdemeanor trials and some felony prelims, ran a court calendar.
And so what's the distinction between the city attorney? Because I was always under the impression that the city attorney handled misdemeanors within the city limits.
Yeah, and that is, you're correct. That's exactly the definition of a city attorney. If a city has their own city attorney, city prosecutor, they're going to handle their misdemeanors unless they contract with the local district attorney's office to do them for them. Otherwise, city attorneys are limited to misdemeanors. District attorneys have both felony and misdemeanor jurisdiction. East LA being unincorporated county space, it didn't have its own city government, didn't have a city attorney. So the DEA has natural jurisdiction for both felonies and misdemeanors in any of those unincorporated areas of the county.
Right. So what about special assignments as you kind of moved through the ranks there? I mean, I've seen there's some real interesting kind of prosecution specialties, I guess you'd call them, in the LA County District Attorney's Office. Where did you find yourself?
I worked after about 4 years in the office. I went to the hardcore gang division,
Yep.
which doesn't exist under George Gascon. They've changed the name. They've kind of gutted the whole purpose of it. But back in those days, and that was probably around 1993, 94 when I went to hardcore. My first assignment in hardcore was the Compton courthouse.
Yep.
My first day there, they handed me 21 murder cases and said, kid, get up to speed. Your first trial is in like 2 weeks. And so all the hardcore deputies primarily did homicides, attempt murders where there was actually a hit. And that, yeah, I did that for about 6 years. And then I went to our hate crime suppression unit just for 1 year. And then I got brought into DA management. I spent, which is where I met you, Bill. I spent quite a few years as the head deputy of the Major Narcotics Division, or like we like to call it MND. I went up into more executive management, the DA's
You know,
office.
I loved hearing about hardcore because in my opinion, the prosecutors that came out of hardcore were some of the best trial prosecutors that I've ever seen. I remember a story, Joe, and you'll probably remember this gentleman, Pierre Prosper.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so he was a hardcore prosecutor in the county, came over to the federal system. Now, Joey, I don't know how many trials he'd had by that time, but he had a handful. I mean, not a handful, a lot. That's what I'm trying to say. He'd had a lot of trials. He'd done murder trials. So he has this federal case, and a federal prosecutor is going to supervise him doing the trial. Now, this federal prosecutor, as it's a little different in federal court. You
Yeah.
don't have the number of trials, the number of the type of experience that a lot of people had coming over from the state, especially Pierre coming from hardcore. And I remember his supervisor was very concerned about this one witness they were going to call because he was in custody. And boy, the supervisor was saying, I don't know, are they going to find him credible? And all of a sudden, Pierre got this smile on his face. And the guy asked him, what are you smiling about? He said, when I had a witness that was in custody, I used to be really thankful because I know he'd show up in court. I knew the deputies would at least transport him and get the witness to show up. So he's like, I don't think this is going to be a problem. We'll make sure that we get this
Yeah.
witness to a point of credibility. But it was just the experience that those people had was phenomenal. Now
Yeah,
you
Pierre was in my training class before we actually got hired as DDA ones, and a very charismatic guy.
Oh,
You
yeah.
could tell, very confident he was going to go places. So
Joey, I want to say he went on to prosecute war crimes in
he did.
Bosnia. Am I right about
Yeah,
that? Or
I believe
something?
that's right.
Yeah, he was great. I don't recall the exact case I had with him, but I'm sure it worked out well. Didn't you take a trip to Colombia with DEA back in the
I
day?
sure did. And
So,
I
so
have to
where did you
say,
go? Bogota or I
yeah, and
can't remember.
it was of all the work trips I've ever taken in my life, and this was a work trip. I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds like it was just fun. And when you have a life in law enforcement, whether you're a prosecutor or a police officer, a trip like this ends up being fun because it's all about learning and meeting other people, developing relationships to try to move the needle in a positive direction. But yeah, we went to Bogota, we went to Cartagena, we flew into the Andes, into the coca fields. We went to P House, that's a military training facility. It was pretty impressive. It was get up in the morning at 6 a.m., be in the vans by 7:30, and then you didn't get home until dinner time or after dinner. Sometimes we had dinner out. But yeah, it was a wonderful experience. It's a shame that we can't do those things anymore. At least that's sort of the impression I've gotten
Right.
from my federal law enforcement friends, is this sort of marriage between local prosecutors, local law enforcement, and the feds. There's a little bit more of a wedge now, a little bit more of a separation. Um, can I? Do we have time? Can I tell a quick story about DEA?
Yeah, love to. I
Absolutely.
wanted to ask you about that trip, but go ahead, Joey.
Yeah. So at a certain point, we were doing a state prosecution involving the doctors and the confidant of Anna Nicole Smith.
Mm-hmm.
It had nothing to do with federal law enforcement, had nothing to do with DEA. This was all state, local law enforcement. As we were in this very contentious trial, very challenging, we had two key witnesses that were the essentially housemaids of Anna Nicole Smith, kind of on and off. And they were Haitian nationals illegally living in the Bahamas working for Anna Nicole Smith. They were critical witnesses to our case. We as a local prosecutor, using every imaginable local resource and state resource I could not get them into Los Angeles because the Bohemian government said, if they leave, they're not coming back because they're illegal. We're not going to let them back in as illegal aliens into our country. We won't kick them out, but if they go, they can't come back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how do I get them here? And kind of on a whim, I called the then special agent in charge of DEA, who I had a really good relationship with, the kind where, Bill, just like with you, and Chief, just like with you, you can pick up the phone and call me anytime about any issue. And I felt the same way with you. And that's how it was with Tim Landro. And I called Tim. I told him what my issue was, had nothing to do with DEA. 72 hours later, the Drug Enforcement Administration, working with the U.S. State Department, they were able to negotiate a deal with the Bohemian government to parole those two women into the United States under security. And we provided that security at the local level so they could testify and then get back into the Bahamas without being deported to Haiti. Who can do that anymore?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's just an extraordinary example of building relationships, partnerships, everybody, even if you're not the ones working on the case, appreciating what the ultimate goal is of your law enforcement partners, and everyone saying, we'll do whatever we can to help. This isn't ego. This isn't about me. It isn't about my success, my victory. It's about helping you be successful because you need my help.
Yeah.
I just feel like that's lost today.
And you know, Joey, the other case around that time that kind of had a similar thread to it was the death of Michael Jackson. Tim was the leader of DEA at that time too, and I worked on that case with robbery homicide, LAPD robbery homicide, and DEA was were able to bring a lot of tools to the table in that case. And I remember we actually, they came with us to Las Vegas and we did some search warrants there on the doctor's house and a pharmacy. And I remember looking through the paperwork at the doctor's office, just tons and tons of paperwork. And there buried, one of the women doing the search warrant pulls this paper out and she says, do you think this is important? And, you know, out of the millions of papers, I look at this paper, it's an order form for propofol to be shipped to the address in Los Angeles. I mean, I said, yeah, I think this is pretty important. And it was just the partnerships like that, like everybody bringing their specific tools to the table to add value to a case. That was phenomenal. And that was a state prosecution, you know, like we were just in it to help. And that's what was so great about it.
But I feel like, you know, back in those days, and I sort of touched on it already, I think that the key element was we developed real relationships with one another. We had each other's cell phone numbers. You could call on the weekend.
Mhm.
You know, one thing when I talk like this, I teach at a law school, and a lot of my students, when I tell war stories, you know, one of the first things that they ask is, well, doesn't that kind of fuzzy the line between the prosecutor and the police officers? Doesn't that kind of make you feel like you have to do what they ask you to do and they have to do what you ask them to do? And, you know, the answer is obviously a resoundingly no, it doesn't. Chief Garrett and I, we had plenty of issues where we worked on them together and we had to agree to disagree on things. Certainly DEA brought far more wiretaps to my division that we rejected because they weren't there. But yes, did I get occasional phone calls from someone high up at DEA or CHP saying, can you take a look at this? And I explained my reasoning. I never was yelled at. I never yielded and said, well, okay, since you're asking nicely, I'll give it to you. Look, we all know what the rules are.
Mhm.
And our jobs and those that follow us, those institutions would collapse if we didn't follow the rules. We didn't do the right things for the right reasons. People don't understand that when I don't know about the DA's office today, but prior to my departure in December of 2020, probably half the felonies that were brought in by law enforcement were either outright rejected or sent out for further investigation, but they weren't filed Johnny on the spot just because a detective that you knew brought it in and said, please, right? If it's not there, it's not there. And people don't really understand that. So I feel like you still have to have those great relationships in order to get things accomplished. But at the same time, when you have those relationships, everyone understands that sometimes you have to say no. And that's a part of the process.
You know what, Joe? Yeah, and Joey, that right there is good, is great leadership. When you can have a relationship with someone and still say no to them, and guess what? They respect it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Bottom
I
line.
got to chime in because,
Yeah.
and Joey knows we've talked about this before. And look, first of all, it shows a ton of humility. It's not just you're reaching out, you're begging for help, you're asking the expertise of people who actually specialize in a particular area of the law, of law enforcement, of experience in different aspects, different crimes. And there's nobody here, certainly on this show today, who knows everything. So when you reach out to a partner in law enforcement, you're actually not asking just for their help, you're asking for their advice. And as Joy alluded to, we agree to disagree on some very, important issues. But I'll tell you right now, every time I walked away from a conversation with Joy, my respect level went up because he wasn't yielding to what I wanted to do from my perspective, from my level of knowledge, expertise, education. He was saying, Mark, here's why I recommend doing this, not doing this based on my expertise. And that's what I would yield to. And so what you guys said 100%. I wanted to touch on one thing, Joy,
Yeah.
you said, and really in general about partnerships, about networking. Tim, and I've forgotten actually how know I well Tim, previous SAC of DEA in Los Angeles. We had a lot of cups of coffee and a lot of sandwiches together in the time that he was there. And just a great resource, one in a chain ending as far as my time frame ending with you, Bill, in the DEA. But for everybody who may be a professional, whether you're in law enforcement or not, listening to this particular podcast, I want you to listen to these two experts right here, Joey and Bill, about building your network. And it's not building a network in order to gain something in the future. You build a network in order to better do your job, in order to better do your job so you can reach out, hey, who can actually help me get the job done that I was sworn to do? That's actually working. That's actually doing the people's business when you're looking at that point of view. And by the way, it goes both ways. So they need help from you to get their job done. So anyway, I know I kind of reiterated things you guys said, but I'm so passionate about that. People ask me, geez, Mark, how did you get that call? Who did you call? Blah, blah. I said, you know what? You treat people right, you show them respect, you stand your ground over time, and those things always come back to help you and help your mission in the future. Always.
I know both you guys are familiar with POLAC, the Police Officers Association of Los Angeles County. So I was involved in that for quite a while, and I met former LAPD, former San Bernardino sheriffs, former Marine Corps Colonel Keith Bushy. I'm sure you probably remember him. Out of
Yes.
the blue, he called me up one day, and he said, Bill, the Marine Corps called me. Is there a chance you can get them a submarine, a narco submarine that they can use to do drills with? And I said, actually, there's a pretty good chance we can do that. Let me call Columbia and see. And sure enough, we called Columbia, their DEA office, and the Columbia National Police had seized one recently. They were using it, et cetera. And we were able to get that narco submarine for the Marine Corps to do some specific training with. And he always joked with me after that, but it goes to exactly what you're saying about building relationships and whatnot. He said, man, I just called out of the blue and Bill got me a submarine. Like, how is that even possible? But you never
So
know.
let me bring this full circle to the
Yeah.
original question about the
Great.
trip to Bogota. When we were there, and I'm pretty sure, I can't remember, I think it was in Cartagena, but I
Mhm.
got to go in one of those narco submarines And I was shocked because it's basically a sailboat with the top cut off, fiberglassed over. It's gutted. There's nothing in it. And it gets a tow by a boat on the surface. I mean, it was pretty Spartan in there, and it was claustrophobic, and it was wild.
That's the word I always think of when I see that. I mean, they're in that thing for days too. They're in that thing for days when they make those trips. Oh, claustrophobia would kill me.
Yeah, same here. Same here. I'm scared of my own podcast room. That's how claustrophobic I am. So I get it.
So one more thing on that topic, I guess, and hey, with the current DA in LA County, obviously, for those that, or maybe I shouldn't say obviously, for those that don't live in California, don't live in Los Angeles, you're probably not aware about this, but he is not the most popular district attorney with the chiefs of police. And oftentimes there was talk about, writing this resolution and we're all going to sign this. And, the way I looked at things, Joey, and I think it goes to a little bit of what both of you were saying is, my job as a leader is to even if I disagree with 95% of what someone says, my job as a leader is to find that 5% where we agree and partner with them on that 5% and move forward. And the other 95%, I got to save that for when I retire or, when I'm in a different place, when I can kind of, explain my differences with the person or whatever. But I do feel that when you're a chief or when you're someone in the law enforcement community, spend your time looking for what you have in common with people, where you can partner with people to serve the people instead of pointing out their weaknesses, pointing out their differences. I don't know. I just feel like that's probably a more successful way to move forward, although it's sometimes painful to do.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think one of the challenges with a lot of our leaders at all different levels of government is we watch them raise their right hand and swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States, the laws of the United States, the Constitution of the state of California, the laws of the state of California, and they swear that right in front of an audience full of people. And then 5 minutes later, they turn around and they impose their own personal views on the law. And one, I think that's confusing for a lot of people. I think it's inconsistent. I don't think that is what leadership is about. And if you don't like what the rules are when you swear to uphold them, then there's a process, right? There's going to the legislature, there's ballot initiatives, there's challenging decisions in courts. We have a long-standing fundamental process that we should be going through. But when an individual can say, yeah, but I don't like that law. I disagree with it. I'm going to impose my own view. The fact that I can't get the local newspaper to really question those decisions in a meaningful way, it is kind of shocking to me. I think that the justice system has three parts. It has the neutral, unbiased referee, the judge. It has the defense lawyer, whose obligation is to the client and the client only. And then there's the representative of the people, of the state, and their job is to do the right thing, whatever that may be. Whatever that may be. And if that is prosecute the individual charged as charged to the fullest extent of the law, that's what it is. If it's dismiss the case outright because it's the wrong person, or they didn't do what somebody said they did, or law enforcement violated their due process, so be it. And if it's somewhere in between that they did something, but it's not deserving of that absolute punishment, then move that needle someplace. That's how the system's supposed to be. But when you have two public defenders running the public defender's office and the district attorney's office, then, just look at what is happening within the DA's office on its rank and file. There has never been less support for a sitting district attorney in modern history, maybe ever, but certainly in modern history.
And I got to chime in there.
Telling you something.
Yeah, Bill,
Sorry,
you said
go ahead.
earlier, you don't know, and my apologies, Joey, but about never being less support, by the public, for this DA. I think it's certainly as important as, like Joey just touched on, the lack of support from his staff, the lack of support. And there's a very diverse group of people who work in the DA's office. I'm talking in every aspect, including politically. And across the board, you have this very low level of support for the DA. That to me is as telling as any other metric that we can look at right now with Gascon.
I think if I can just add something, Bill, look, I don't think there's anything wrong with any elected official, including district attorney, who looks at our system and says, is there a way we can do it better?
Right.
Just because we've been doing it this way for however many decades doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way or it's the best way today. So I don't fault anyone from, examining what the rules are and saying, is there a more effective way, something that's more equitable? But I'm a firm believer in, if you're going to do that, it should be a toe in the water. You should create a pilot program. You should see how it works, see if it's effective. Does it make sense?
Mhm.
Do you have the infrastructure already built in to deviate from the existing approach to this new, more novel approach? Before you just wipe it clean the old way and say, we're doing it this new way without any idea. And I don't care what anyone says. When people say, but the data supports, what data?
No.
Nobody's doing it. So what data support? You can find data to say anything you want, right? It's that's the part, not being in the system anymore. I think that's the most frustrating for me, is I don't have my ability anymore to make decisions
Yeah.
within what I believe to be the best prosecutor's office in the country. It's hit a little bump in the road right now, and I'm hoping by November, December, that ship's going to get righted again. But it's really hard to watch, to see all these DAs trying to do the right thing, and they're told, just because the law says to do that, you're ordered not to do that.
Yes. So
And
let me just dig into that a little bit, Joey, because that's something that Mark and I spoke about, I don't know, 2 months ago, Mark, the whole premise of lawmaking by
Right.
memo or by executive order. I think
Right.
in the United States right now, this premise that you're talking about changing laws with the stroke of a pen by someone who is not in the legislative branch of government is a huge problem. We saw it with marijuana in the federal system, and they artfully write things in a way to make it appear that it's about the use of resources. But the reality is they're giving instruction to people, do not prosecute this type of crime.
sure.
And that should be, I think, troubling to people. What's your opinion on that when people in the executive branch of government, so to speak, take up lawmaking and start using memorandums and, like you said, their personal directives, and they start changing laws and, in essence, writing new laws, really?
Yeah, I think, there's a fine line between a policy memo that tells an agency how to interpret existing law and a policy memo that changes existing law. The former scenario, there's long-standing precedent in this country that, any government body can draft regulations or policies that interpret or expand upon existing law. But there is no, to my knowledge, authority to create their own law simply because they don't like the existing law. There's a process for that. And that does become troubling. And, my experience is more on the local level.
Mm.
And certainly I've been out of the LADA's office for, I don't know, I'm in my fourth year. I left in December of 2020. So I'm in my fourth year now. And a week doesn't go by. Like the first couple months, it was daily I would hear
Right.
from my former colleagues. But still, almost 4 years later, a week doesn't go by. I'm not exaggerating, that I don't get a text message, an email, or a phone call from someone wanting to vent because they're scared they're going to lose their job. They're scared they're going to get demoted. They're scared they're going to get transferred. Something horrible was said to them, or they're being asked to go do something through a written policy that is inconsistent with what is in the California Penal Code, the Government Code, the Evidence Code, or whatever. And yeah, that is a problem, but and I don't know how to fix it. I think it's this entire country, we're seeing kind of a strange shift in the way we see and what we expect out of our leaders. And it seems like, and this is my own personal view,
Uh-huh.
like the more this goes on, the more everyone's okay with it.
Right.
And it's
Yes.
not okay
Yeah.
because it's not what the rules are.
Joey, I just could not agree more in that last word you said, or in the last sentence, rule. This is what happens when you start detaching, unmooring yourself as a leader, elected official, or representative from the rule of law. That's why the rule of law exists in the first place, because everyone knows that people have their prejudices, their inclination, their respective philosophies, things like this. And this is why we all, as individuals in society, have to have certain rules that keep us on an agreed upon path. Now, like you said earlier, this is what the ballot boxes for. This is what representatives for, legislatures are for. We can change the rules, but once the rules are in place, we all have to abide by them. And like you said earlier, we can work to renegotiate those rules, to change the rules, to end rules, to create new ones. But while they're in place, we have to stay in those guidelines. Otherwise, it becomes literally chaos. Once it becomes chaos, again, as you said, people start getting used to edict. In other words, things just change instantly based on the whim of a certain official or certain officials or certain groups. This leads to chaos. We can't have it. And that's why
Yeah,
I show and talk about what our motto is: we believe in the rule of law for a reason, because we know we're all imperfect. We have to have a path to stay on.
yeah. Well, like you think about it, right now you have a lot of elected officials, a lot of elected district attorneys who say, I am not going to evaluate a capital case on its merits.
Mhm.
I'm going to uniformly, before I ever see one, I'm going to say, we're never seeking capital punishment. Okay. People, for the most part, seem to be okay with that, right? But the law says you have discretion to evaluate these cases, and maybe some should and some shouldn't be. And if we don't like that law, then let's overturn it, right? I'm
Correct.
not a death penalty zealot. Let's have an initiative. Let's pass it through legislation. But it seems like the legislatures don't have the cojones to do it themselves. So they're willing to let elected DAs just wipe it clean. But just humor me for a second. What if an elected DA said, you know, I think every capital case should be a death penalty case. I'm not going to evaluate any of them on their merits. If you commit a special circumstance murder, you're getting the death penalty in my jurisdiction. We would, all of us, including me, we would throw up our arms and go, that is not fair. That is not right. That is not what the law says. So why is it okay to do one and it's not okay to do the other when there's a process by which, and we've asked California voters multiple times in the last decade, what do you want to do with this issue? And both times they say, nah, let's keep it, but just be careful and use it judiciously.
Mhm.
Don't go out and, use it inappropriately. Don't discriminate when you use it. Base it on the merits of the case.
Yeah.
So
It's you,
it's
you put it so well, Joy. And by the way, I am pro death penalty in the sense that I want it on the books, but I also agree that not every capital case should result in someone receiving the death penalty.
right, right.
But this is exactly right, and you lined it beautifully about it. If it happened one way, there would be at least political riots in that sense. But the way it is now, and even the way it is now in California, a lot of other states, someone commits the most heinous, most egregious act of murder or murders, and 25 years later, they're still in a cell in San Quentin. In other
Right.
words, this is another abomination of the law in my case. In other words, listen, we don't need 25 years of appeals. There's something wrong with the system if we can't get a mass murderer executed, if the laws are in the book for execution, within a timely manner. So you're absolutely right about this, and
Well, it's
I'm glad you
another
actually.
example, though. It's another example of government saying, people, you decide what the rules should be. And the people decided, but the leaders don't like it. So then they find roundabout ways to circumvent what the people want. I mean, what message are you sending to the public that we go through these initiatives, but they're really meaningless unless they do the things we want them to do. And if they
Right.
do what we want them to do, then hurrah, let's push forward. But if they don't, then let's dismantle the death chamber at San Quentin so no one could ever be executed, right? I'll do that by executive order, but I won't grant clemency to all those on death row, right? That would be too politically risky. So let me find another way to do it. I mean,
Right.
and I'm not trying to be critical of our governor, but that is the people voted, the people said this is what we want. And yet we find clever ways to, circumvent what the rules are, as long as it fits our narrative. It's just an interesting time. I mean, when I
Yeah.
first became a prosecutor, I go to, with a lot of my law school friends that were in private practice, and they were making way more money than I was, driving nice cars. I was driving a Ford Escort. But we go to parties together and out drinking or whatever. And they tease me. It's because everyone wanted to hear the stories from my job. No one cared about what they did. They
Mhm.
just wanted to hear, about crime and working with law enforcement and being in court and, jury trials and all that kind of stuff. Nowadays, I was talking to a friend who's in the office and who's still in the office. And he said to me, well, I used to love to say, when people ask me what I did, I'm a deputy DA for LA County. And then I, changed it to, well, I'm a prosecutor. Well, then I changed it to just say, I'm a government lawyer. He goes, now all I say is, I'm just a lawyer. I'm an attorney. I don't want to tell him what I did. That's just so sad to me, right?
It-
It's crazy. But look, if my kids, one of my sons who worked a summer in the DA's office in the hardcore gang division, and he loves the law enforcement piece. He's come to my office a lot when I was the chief deputy, and he knows a lot of the DAs. And when DEA used to bring, wiretap to my house to look at whatever, he'd want to go meet the special agents. And he and I talked about, a life in law enforcement. And I don't want him to be a lawyer and be a DA, nor would I want him to be a law enforcement officer. I mean, it's like a thankless job these days, and you're expected to be perfect. Right? It's strict liability if you're a cop these days. You can't,
Right.
you know that old saying, to err is to be human. And I get certain errors that police make are fatal errors, right? And then there is some responsibility. Primarily, it's civil unless you can show real intent. But man, I mean, you make a mistake in a police report, just the date now, and the departments want to throw you out. I mean, it's like tough. It's really
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry,
You
I'm
know,
digressing.
yeah, no,
No, you're
so,
not
so
digressing. You're absolutely right. It's interesting. Go ahead, Bill.
no, I was just going to talk about, Joey mentioned when he left the office, and I think, hey, at least on the federal side, here's the challenge with federal prosecution. When there's turnover in administration, the administration flips, like we had Trump a Republican, Biden was elected in November 2020. A month later, the U.S. attorney resigns, right? That's a normal thing. It was Nick Hanna, an incredible, incredible leader. He resigns. And again, that's a normal thing that happens every time there's a change of administration. Unfortunately, with the way the federal system works, 6 months goes by, a year goes by, there's an acting, right? And when there's an acting prosecutor, an acting U.S. attorney, they don't necessarily want to make waves. They don't want to institute any new programs. They just want to kind of keep the ship going smooth and wait to see who's going to get the job. I think it was actually a year and a half it took to appoint the new U.S. attorney. And then some people in the office say, they read the tea leaves and they say, this guy's out in 2 years. He's not going to be my boss in 2 years. There's going to be another flip-flop in the administration. Why am I going to listen to what he says? So on the federal side, sometimes, moving offices forward and being progressive and just being able to come in as a leader and get things done. Sometimes it's incredibly challenging to do that just
Yeah.
because of politics and timeframes. In the county DA system that we have in California, or the local prosecution of crimes, what are the challenges that go along with having an elected DA and the potential that they could be out 4 years? Or just talk to me about how politics plays into moving the office forward and being a leader in that office.
Yeah, I think on some level, all elected officials, no matter where they work, federal, state, local, have to contend with what you described, right? You're only there because you got enough people to vote for you to be there. You could do the best job ever, but if a new shiny toy comes along that the public likes more, you could be out right in 4 years. And that applies to every level of government. Obviously, incumbents have an advantage because you see the title on the ballot and a lot of people are uninformed and they just pick the person that has the existing title, right? But yeah, that's always going to be an issue. But I think that, and this is probably a little Pollyanna-ish, pie in the sky-ish, I guess, but I would love for some leader to say, here's who I am, here's what I'm about, give me the job, and I'm going to do my job as I just described it. And in 4 years, if you don't like it, I get it, then vote me out. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. But I'm not going to change my direction because of fear of losing my job.
Mm.
I think it's inherent with these elected jobs that, you know, it would be nice if any of them took that kind of approach. But instead, it's like, well, who's the loudest voice out there? What's that loud voice saying? Oh my God, I've got to give them what they want. Even if I don't necessarily believe in it, I have to give them what they want. I think a lot of our elected leaders don't often believe in a lot of the things they say, but they believe that's what the audience wants to hear. And even if the audience is small, but it's the loudest, that's who they want to appease and appeal to. And it's just, I don't know. I mean, I don't remember as a young adult even thinking about these kinds of things. Maybe it's always existed as I just described it. I don't know. It didn't feel that way. I worked for Ira Reiner, Gilgar Steady, Steve Cooley, and Jackie Lacey. Those are the four elected DAs I worked for in my 32 years. All of them had certain great qualities. All of them, had different qualities than the others. Steve Cooley comes in. I didn't even know who he was when he ran for DA. I had never met him. We had never crossed paths ever. And same with Jackie Lacey. I had never met Jackie until she and I were assigned together in hate crimes for a 12-month period. And so when Steve wins, he right away is examining the 3 strikes and wanting to modify how, and I question those things, but those were great decisions. They were great decisions for the right reasons. And, I was fortunate because, working for Jackie, she was an incredible boss, incredible leader. She was willing to look at the justice system, just like Steve Cooley was, and say, well, just because we've always done it this way, is that the best way to do it? But both were more toes in the water. Both were, let's do a pilot program. Let's see if it works. And when it does, we expand it, not just wholesale change things. But, and I apologize for going on, but here's what I'll say about Jackie Lacey. Okay. We talk about politicians, elected officials doing things to appease the loudest audience. That lady was blasted by a small group that was so loud. And she knew how it could impact her career as the elected DA. And she never bent a knee. She never yielded to it. She knew that it was somewhat political suicide for her not to do it, but she knew it wasn't the right thing to say, well, I'm going to go out and willy-nilly prosecute police officers. She held firm. I'll tell you, we reviewed so many officer-involved shootings, and it's a hard job for an elected DA to review those and not want to give the public what they're clamoring for, which is, someone in blue on a stake. And she refused. If it was there, if it was a legitimate, violation of the law, she'd give you the thumbs up to go after, to prosecute them. But if it wasn't, she never once said, push that up a little bit. Let's get this in court. And when people say things like, well, just throw it in front of a jury and let's see what they decide. Well, how would you like that if that was your kid?
Right.
Right? I mean, you expect prosecutors to use their discretion to do the right thing for the right reasons, not for any other reason, not to appease some group out there. Do it for the right reasons. She did. And, she took a political hit for it, but that's part of the process, I guess. But I
Joy,
applaud her for remaining firm on the mission to do the right thing for the right reasons.
I am so glad, Joy, you actually brought up Jackie Lacey specifically. But in addition to Jackie, those three previous DAs that you worked for, like you said, and I know a couple of them very well, Jackie being one of them. And I know for a fact that they did have divergent, in other words, this person
Right.
had divergent political views, things like this. But one thing they all had in common, to the best of my understanding, my knowledge and experience with them, is they believed in the rule of law. They had a job to do as
Right.
far as what they were sworn to do. They really believed that. And to your point about Jackie, not, pardon my analogy here, but not kneeling to the mob, because we know that actually literally happened in 2020 and 2021. One case in particular, and ladies and gentlemen, you can look this up, but the Marling Pennant case involving a California Highway Patrol officer on I-10 freeway in Los Angeles, a white officer and a black female suspect. Long story short, people wanted that officer prosecuted for everything you could think of. And Jackie looked at the evidence and found nothing in the way of violation of law in this officer. And I think that particular case, as much as any other case or general issue, cost Jackie Lacey the election as much as anything else, because she stood her ground based on the law, not based on pressure of any sort, political, social. She was looking at what the law says. She was looking at the evidence presented to her. And I give her so much credit. She's not the only one of those people that you articulated, Joey, but she's the latest that stood her ground. And again, it cost her, but she was a true leader in that role, as you were, because again, you and I have had some very interesting, some very spicy conversations. And you guys always did what you thought the law dictated you do in your role. So
I
I'm glad
think,
you brought that up.
I think that what the general public doesn't really understand, and I don't think the media does a very good job of explaining it, that there's a difference between criminal liability and civil liability.
Right.
And just because a prosecutor doesn't find that a police officer breached that criminal liability threshold, it doesn't mean that the police officer, their department, the city, the municipality they work for isn't civilly responsible, right? We have tort law
Correct.
for a reason. People make mistakes. But the media doesn't really explain that, where people understand that distinction, that the threshold for criminal is beyond a reasonable doubt. For civil, it's much lower. It's, preponderance of the evidence, 50% plus a featherweight, as my law professor liked to say. And that it doesn't mean that a police officer, because they make a mistake, can't be held responsible, but it's in a different forum, right? And there are different rules that apply and different elements that have to be met to make it a criminal violation. It's fascinating when you think about that. We as a society have said that there's only one occupation domestically that can carry guns, can go out and about, identify themselves as carrying guns, and their job is to protect me, you, and everyone else and themselves. And they're allowed to use that lethal weapon in order to effectuate what I just described. And yet when they do, you guys ever see that news video? It was from a helicopter. It was at night. It was a high-speed pursuit on one of the local freeways here. And I got to find my cell phone. I don't know if Chief, if we talked about this when I was on your show, but as the guy's running down the street, and there's tons of law enforcement with their guns drawn, chasing after him, the guy turns around, and you can see it from the helicopter's vantage point, turns around like this and points that at the police.
Mhm.
It's dark out, and they light him up. They light him up. And in hindsight, had everyone known it was just a telephone, they would not have fired on him.
Mhm.
But in the heat of the moment, the police aren't required to take a bullet first before
Correct.
they shoot their weapons, right? It's like we have lost the concept of obeying the police. I tell my kids, you get pulled over, roll down your window, don't get out, put your hands on your steering wheel with your fingers up, palms
Yeah,
facing the windshield.
it's good advice.
If you and my kids have said, well, what if they're wrong, Dad? What if I didn't do anything? I'm like, that's what the court system's for. That's what lawyers are for. We'll challenge that then. You don't take it upon yourself to challenge the police officer. You say, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, no, ma'am, no, sir. You follow what that's their job. They're doing their job. And if we think that they did it in a way that violates the law, then we'll take that up ourselves through the court system. That's what it's for. But nowadays, it's like everybody, takes the position, hey, cop pulled me over, cop wants to talk to me. Screw you. I don't have to obey. I don't have to comply. And then things go wrong. And then the police do what they're trained to do. And then they get in trouble for it.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. I'll get off that topic.
No, actually, only reason you guys know me, I'll talk forever if you let me. I just wanted to make sure Bill didn't want to get a word in there. But when you talk about that story with the car chase, it turns into a foot pursuit and the cell phone. I've been in that situation. I was in that situation a few times as an officer. And I think about it was literally a split-second decision where I had my gun drawn, aimed at the suspect, who turns out pointing a screwdriver at me, turns out pointing a spray can at me. And again, this is in the dead of night. No or very little lighting. And I guess maybe to my detriment as far as what I should have done based on training, I hesitated both times. And these are at the end of foot pursuits. Someone running from an officer, having been given verbal commands to stop while I'm chasing them. And they stop and turn and point something at me. Actually, one was actually removing a spray can. I was chasing this guy for vandalism. And he's trying to get rid of the spray can. He turns with me and I'm thinking it's a weapon. The screwdriver, he pulls it out because he actually turns to stand his ground with the screwdriver. I'm thinking that might be a firearm. Both times I'm drawing. I'm looking back right now. What would have happened to me had I fired at either one of those suspects and hit them and killed them? What would have I don't know. I'm
Right.
thinking back in the mid-90s, I might have been better off in Los Angeles County than I would have in, say, 2024
Sure.
in Los Angeles County. I might have fared better legally. But these are the decisions that officers make. And these, as importantly, these are the decisions that young people in this society make. First of all, I'm going to run from the cops. Then I'm going to engage in these highly furtive movements under the worst circumstances and hoping the cop doesn't shoot me when I do it. And if they do, then I hope that my lawyer sues him forever. And I hope that the DA charges them with murder or felony manslaughter and go to prison. This is what we're up against right now. It is a complete disrespect to the rule of law. Make sure you do the right thing first. But listen, we have a society that's not being taught this. This is the underlying problem. And now I'm on a rant right now, Joey. See, I told you, so you don't feel bad. But this, you're talking about those 4 DAs for whom you worked over 30 years. And none of those people that I know of ever took their position to engage what I call in social experimentation. They were in strategic, maybe experimentation, like you said, toe in the water or tactical. How can we get to this goal more efficiently, more effectively, more equitably than my predecessor or through another DA? How can we do a better job of what we're sworn to do? The difference now is it's like, how do we tear down the old system right to the ground and rebuild it, so to speak, in my vision? That's how I see things happening right now, not only in Los Angeles County, but jurisdictions across the country by people with the same types of philosophies and goals. So with that, Bill, I do want to make sure that I'll catch a breath to let you actually say a word if you want to.
No, listen, I'm with you guys. I think that the table is turning. Like, I look up north in San Francisco and I see things happening up there with crime and punishment that are, which weren't happening a couple of years ago. And I think they've seen that it's just not working. That a lot of the new reforms, a lot of the new, I don't know, is it social justice? Is that the term? I mean,
Appears to be.
yeah, it
Yes.
just hasn't. When it comes to quality of life, it has not worked. Prop 47. I don't know, Joey. That's a whole discussion for a different day. But Prop 47, I think, is one of the things here in California that was really, in my opinion, detrimental to quality of life. And when I remember when I first came out and said something to that effect, the DA called me an idiot.
Yeah, I
Join the
think
club.
Prop 47 is a great example. It was a ballot initiative, so the voters voted for it. The title of it, though, was the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act.
Safe
And
neighborhoods.
I'm
How
not sure
deceiving.
what it did to make schools safer and neighborhoods safer. Right now, there's another initiative that is gaining a lot of traction in California, and it's called the Homelessness, Drug Addiction, and Theft Reduction Act. And that's actually exactly what it is. And it's really to make some modest amendments to Prop 47 to try to hold people more accountable on the theft crimes, to allow courts and prosecutors to have a little bit more influence on getting those addicted to drugs into treatment. Right now, a judge can offer it, but if they don't want it, they're not going to go.
Thank you.
Prior to Prop 47, the judge could make them go. And I understand statistically when a judge sent people to a drug treatment program, maybe 15 out of 100 actually found success, but that's 15 more than we're getting right now because no one wants to go. And, and then you look at how the, department stores, the retail industry, how hugely they're being impacted by Prop 47. You think about, this is the perfect example of no toe in the water. It's a whole full-scale shift in the way we do business. The fact that someone can go to Target and steal $950 worth of goods, leave, go to Walmart and steal another $950 worth of goods, go to Home Depot, steal another $950 worth of goods, and you can't aggregate those together to make it a felony. It's crazy. So there is no accountability. There's no responsibility for people that engage in that. And look, there's a huge difference between a mom who, goes in and steals diapers and baby formula for their kid and what we're seeing with these organized smash and grabs that are, well structured. They know specifically the kinds of goods they want to take, and then they're taking them. Yep. So this new initiative that I talked about, I know like right now, they need 546,000 signatures to get on the ballot. They have 550,000 right now. But because of the percentage of errors in the signatures, they're going to need like 880,000 signatures. So, and anyone who's watching this, if you have a chance to sign that initiative, sign for it.
Again, Joey?
Pardon me?
Give the name again of the initiative.
It's called the Homelessness, Drug Addiction, and Theft Reduction Act. And it doesn't have a number yet because it doesn't have the full signatures, but it's certainly, I know Walmart, Target, Home Depot, Macy's, the large grocery stores, the San Manuel Tribes, 7-Eleven, all major donors in helping fundraise for it. They have over $6 million behind the initiative, and polling right now, just on the name alone, gets like 70% will vote for it. And then once you tell those that are polled what it's about, it like jumps up to almost 80%, I think. So I think the public kind of was duped into Prop 47, with the name.
Yep.
And look, there's nothing wrong with saying people that commit petty theft shouldn't be treated like felons. But when the petty thieves are in fact acting like felons, now you don't have a tool to deal with them. And you need to have that tool. The bad guys they're clever, they're smart, they're no dummies. Has anyone seen that video of the inmate in state prison? He had like one of those Pruno glasses or Aqua Velva made into alcohol. And when George Gascon got elected, he raised it up and he's like, here's you,
I forgot about it.
It's like the bad guys pay attention. They're a lot smarter than we think. And once they realize how you can get around the law, where it's safe to do certain things and not expose yourself to true liability, they're going to take it. And that's what they've done. So the only way really to rectify Prop 47, and I get we shouldn't abolish it because it's done some decent things and the general concepts make sense. You don't want to treat a petty thief like a felon, but it's gone way too far. So these modest amendments in this new initiative will pull back some of that. And it's not draconian at all. It's not going back to the old way, but it allows law enforcement and prosecutors, when people are multiple offenders, to use discretion to charge them as felons.
And just to remind people, like, in my opinion, this whole retail theft thing, it's created also a little bit of an underground economy. Don't forget that there's no sales tax collected when these goods are sold.
Right.
There's no income tax paid on the profits made from these stolen goods. So, people say, oh, Bill, that's, that doesn't impact anything. I encourage people to look at the dollar amount that these retailers, the big retailers that you named, look at the dollar amount that they're classifying now as spillage or whatever they call it on their financials. And it will blow your mind.
Drive down 6th Street towards downtown, and it's like a bazaar on the sidewalk with all these power tools.
Yeah.
And they're brand new power tools. And where do they come from?
I was going down Figueroa a couple months ago. So that's South LA. And I don't know, probably in, maybe around 54th Street in Figueroa in South LA. And this exactly what you described, tables of power tools, all organized by color. I don't know, the blue, the Makita ones, the red, and I mean, hundreds of tools just laid out there. And I got to tell you, I was like, man, there's a couple things I need,
Well,
but you just can't do it.
And the real chilling effect is that the retailers and their security are essentially too afraid to do anything. Right? Because if you try to go arrest these people with your in-house security, they're not going to yield to you. You now expose yourself to more liability if your security has to go hands-on and do something. So it's almost becoming a cost of doing business, but it's a major cost. And these retailers are changing the way they do business. They're locking their goods up. They're offering less goods. They're closing some of their stores in certain areas because they're so prevalent to be, commercially burglarized, even though the law doesn't call it a commercial burglary anymore. It's just a petty theft. But $950 is a lot of goods.
It is.
Well, it is. And it's not just your Targets and things like this, the Walmarts. You look at In-N-Out Burger in Oakland. They said, we can't take it anymore. And that's just for general crime taking place in the parking lots, their employees being harassed, their patrons being harassed. And so it's having an absolute blanket effect on the economy in California. One thing on that, I pulled up an article for the show. I knew we were going to talk a little bit about Prop 47. And I was reading, just recently, there was a man in Griffin, Georgia. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison after being charged with that county's DA for retail theft amounting to about $2,000 from a Lowe's. $2,000. He got 10 years. Now, again, I don't know if that's going to be whittled down. He'll probably get out in 3 or 4 years, but he got sentenced to 10 years. He also, don't want to leave this out, he had a long prior rap sheet from various states for the same type of behavior. Now, is 10 years for $2,000 of retail theft, is that harsh? Yeah, it's pretty harsh. The point is that going to encourage or discourage the same type of behavior by other would-be criminals? My guess is it'll discourage it if that is the temperature in that county. And like you said earlier, Joey, listen, it doesn't mean that all these things are all bad or things like that. But my goodness, I think I'd rather live in a county, in a state who takes that approach, that we're not going to allow this. There will be concrete consequences if you engage in XYZ behavior, rather than if you, go ahead.
I was going to say that
in Los Angeles.
Let me jump in there, Mark. That's a segue. And we'll wrap up with this. When I hear your comments on it, yesterday, Joey, one of our mutual friends, is running for city council in Laguna Niguel. Gene, he's running for city council down there. So I went down to a fundraising event that he had yesterday. And on the way down to Orange County, I live in LA County, I'm on the freeway. And just as I'm about to enter Orange County, I see this huge billboard, which I took a picture of. And it says, "Crime doesn't pay in Orange County. If you steal, we prosecute." And I don't see if it says who paid for it on there. I'm going to have to check.
It was, it
Orange,
was,
Orange
what
County
do you call
DA.
it? It was drug money. It was
Yeah. It's asset
Yeah.
forfeiture money.
asset for it. I
So-
could not get the phrase out. Sorry.
So, I mean, that goes to what you're saying, Mark, over now, he borders Los Angeles County. They feel like they need to really differentiate what the criminal justice system is doing in Orange County so that they don't get that spillover crime. Here's what Todd Spitzer, the DA in Orange County, said about it. He said, quote, "I want thieves to understand this is not Los Angeles County. We still prosecute in Orange County, and just because LA is very lenient on people who steal, if you come to Orange County, we're going to prosecute you to the full extent of the law." With the rise in theft, especially smash and grab robberies, Spitzer wants to send a very clear message, since he says the majority of those arrested and prosecuted in Orange County come from the outside area, largely Los Angeles County. So here's a situation where, arguably, because of what's happening in Los Angeles County and the prosecutorial choices that are being made, the policies that are being put in place, it's creating spill-off in the whole region, and other communities are having to go to the extent of putting up, I think they put a total of $250,000 into this advertising campaign to say, we don't tolerate that here. Just to be clear, we don't tolerate that here. Keep that in Los Angeles. When you see that's what it's come to, Joey, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I've lived in LA for 40 years. My wife was born and raised here. My kids were born and raised here. I love Los Angeles. My entire adult life has been here, and I had a great career in working for Los Angeles County. It saddens me when I hear, either DAs or mayors of other jurisdictions saying things like, "This is not LA. Go back to LA and commit your crimes, because if you commit them here, we're going to hold you accountable." I mean, it's like I grab my head and I go, Los Angeles is an amazing city. Right? We have beautiful weather. We have a massive coastline, right? Great food, great things to do. It should be safe. It should be beautiful. And now look at it. I mean, it doesn't look like it did when I first moved here, or even the way it did 20 years ago. And so, yeah, that really saddened me. But I think, and I read that article because you had sent it to me, Bill. I think they're really talking about the initiative. And I'll throw this out there just in case. You both know I'm friends with Anne Marie Schubert, the former district attorney of Sacramento. And I absolutely think the world of Anne Marie Schubert. And I supported her when she ran for attorney general of the state of California. But she's one of the real movers and shakers behind this new initiative. So if you want really more data, more details, bring her on. I'm sure she'd love to talk to you about it. But I think that's what this article is talking about is, look, we're going to, they reference the California Retailers Association in that article. And I think people are really set up with these massive changes in the law that were sold to the public under a different heading, and they think it's to do something else. Who really reads the nuances of all these laws?
Yeah.
And unless you know the rules, it's hard. I mean, I looked up the bill because you threw this out as a potential topic. I looked up the Communications Decency Act, and I'm reading through like 50 pages of case law and all that. And I got a lawyer for 35 years. I had to go back and read some paragraphs a second, third time to make sure I was understanding what they were saying. Your average person's not going to read an initiative, read a law, and it's going to go, yep, makes perfect sense. They go with what the headline is, and then what the summaries are in the media and by the talking heads. And that's how we make our decisions, unfortunately. So, but I think it's time now that we pull back a little bit on Prop 47 and look, this new initiative isn't designed to repeal it. Prop 47 still exists. Everything in it still exists, except if you're a multiple offender, now you can prosecute them as a felony. If you're a multiple possessioner of serious narcotics, the court can now, after so many times, has the discretion at least to send you to a drug treatment program. So it's trying to find a middle ground where the general concepts of fairness in Prop 47 still remain, but then the sort of draconian results of Prop 47 are brought back a little bit where there's some accountability and responsibility.
Makes sense. Joey, I saved the most important question for last. What is your cigar of choice? If you're going to smoke a cigar tonight, what is it going to be?
Boy, if I knew you were going to ask me this, I would have had a picture ready of my 2 temperature-controlled and humidity-controlled humidors that each hold like 1,000 cigars, and the thing is packed. I have to say, all right, if I'm going to smoke a Cuban cigar, I'm a huge fan of the Bolivar Royal Corona Tubos. It's a delicious cigar. I also love the Romeo y Julieta Churchill Añejados, and I have a box of those too that are pretty old. If I'm going to smoke a non-Cuban cigar, the Arturo Fuente Angel Share, the manager over at the Lone Wolf in Santa Monica, is the first person who turned me on to it. And he didn't have any, and it took me like 6 months to find them. But that Fuente Opus X Angel Share is a phenomenal cigar for a non-Cuban cigar.
Fair enough.
So guys,
when I was a kid, I liked the ones that were bubblegum. That's about my level.
Anytime you want to have a cigar, I'll supply the cigars, and you'll have almost endless choices.
Yeah. Listen, I found the Padron 1964 Anniversario, natural wrapper, very mild, and that's my go-to now.
You can't go wrong with a Padron.
No.
I love the Padron. I love the 46, the 45 anniversary. The very first fine cigar I ever smoked, my partner that I work with now, Bill Secchi, he's the one who kind of got me into finer cigars when we were young DAs, and took me to a cigar shop and picked out like 6 cigars for me. And I wanted to get him something nice to say thank you. So I went to a cigar shop and I said, look, I need one really nice cigar. And the owner said, hands down, the Padron 1964 Exclusivo, get him that. And that was the first Padron I had ever had. And I've got plenty of Padrones.
Yep.
I turned my brother on to Padrones. Yeah. Great cigar.
Maduro or natural wrapper? Which one?
Natural wrapper.
Yeah,
I'm not a Maduro guy.
No, me
I
neither.
love the natural wrapper. Yeah.
Mark, I hear you've spent some time at the Grand Havana Room, Mark.
I spent a few nights there, but I am not the expert that you guys are in cigars.
No, neither. I'm not either. I just know what I like.
But just so you know, for about the last 2 minutes, I wasn't even sure I was hearing English. Okay, that's how ignorant I am with this stuff. But you know what? I know what I like, and I've had a few that I've enjoyed, but I wouldn't be able to recount any names. They hand them to me. That's not bad. Oh, that one I don't care too much for. So,
well, Bill, the last time I was at the Grand Havana Room, I was there with 2 of your former colleagues, Dr. John Goldberg.
Oh, wait a minute. First of all, Joey, just so you know, Goldberg is not ever not at the Grand. I think he actually sleeps there about 6.
Listen, he doesn't even live in the state anymore. He doesn't even
live
live in the state anymore. He's there more than me.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was out visiting, and the 3 of us met there. That was the last time I was there. Love those guys too. Again, just great relationships I made with you, Bill, and with other folks at DEA. One thing I just want to say about Bill is, which I appreciate you didn't bring it up, and maybe because you don't remember, or maybe because you didn't want to embarrass me, but when you were talking about the U.S. attorney after the Nick Hanna got booted out, I had just left the DA's office and I applied to get that job. I very much thought it would be a good fit for me, leaving as the chief deputy of a 1,000 lawyer law office to a much smaller U.S. attorney's office. But I knew all the stakeholders, and I made it to the final 3 when it was Senator Feinstein making the decision. And then it kind of turned on its head and went to Padilla. And then I wasn't involved anymore. But my point is, one of the first people I called up was Bill Bodner, because he was the special agent in charge of DEA here. And I'm like, Bill, would you consider endorsing me, a local prosecutor. He didn't blink, didn't hesitate. It was within like 48 hours. I got a letter on DEA letterhead that he was supporting me for U.S. attorney. So
Yeah.
those are the kind of, and here I was just a
What
local
could have
guy,
been, Joey?
not
What
a
could have been?
prosecutor in the federal system.
Yeah. That, I mean, so yeah, I mean, what can I say? I was actually thought about reading that letter today because to open, because it goes to who you are as a person, what you accomplished as a prosecutor, your leadership. You were, quote, the man in what I would call the heyday of the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. And so the letter was one part of it. The story I didn't tell you was some separate outreach we did to Miss Feinstein. And I got a little heat for that from the Department of Justice. Like, hey, who's this guy reaching out to this, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, sometimes, what do we say, Mark? Do the right thing regardless of the personal consequences. And that's what that was about. Like,
Yeah.
Joey, thanks for coming on today. You are missed. You were an incredible asset, an incredible partner, and an incredible mind, an incredibly scholarly mind in the legal field that I know we would call a bunch of times with just crazy ideas and crazy theories of stuff. And thank you for holding our hands at DEA and walking us through them. And really, at the end of the day, making the community safer and helping us accomplish our mission.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate both of you guys. You know how much I respect you and the work you all did. And I'm going to quote Steve Cooley, who Steve always says the best thing he ever did was surround himself with good people and smart people. And I feel like I learned from him to do that. So I was always very fortunate that all the people I worked with, you two included, and the people I had around me in whatever division I was in, they were always smarter than me. They were always harder working than I was, and they always made me look good. And that certainly is a driver to want to do your best for those that you work with. So I appreciate that. Like I said, if I could go back, I'd go back again and do it all over again. It was a great time, and I felt like we all accomplished really good things for LA County.
Thanks, Joey, on that. We'll sign off. Thank you, everybody, for watching, for listening. Joey, we'll be hopefully seeing you soon, one place or another, maybe the Grand Havana Room.
Anytime.
Right.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Really enjoyed it.